Welcome to Simply Sewing from Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and last month we talked about reading the back of the pattern. Well, this month, let's talk about what's in the pattern. For the next couple of videos, I'm going to be using McCall's pattern M7942. There's a whole series of patterns that have this Learn to Sew for Fun on them. This particular one has a pair of shorts, a little skirt, a shirt, and a pair of pants. And the pants and the skirts are the paper bag patterns, which are a lot of fun to do with. When we look at the front of the pattern, this particular one gives us 3 different techniques that we are going to be able to learn using this pattern. And it'll tell you right here what you're going to be able to learn. In this case, we have inverted pleats, a waistband, and a pocket. For today, I'm going to work on this little child skirt, and I'm going to use the smallest pattern possible so that I can get as much as I can in the camera. But you'll be able to use whatever size that you want. This pattern does have pockets in it and an elastic waistband. And we're going to know all that information by reading the back. I will be making skirt B, so I will go to view B. And in my case, I'm going to make the smallest one, which is size 3 to 4, and it will tell me how much fabric I need. If I'm buying 45-inch fabric, I'm going to need 1 1/8. If I'm going to use a 60-inch wide fabric, I'm going to use 7/8. My fabric is 45 inches, so I have bought 1 1/8 yard. Inside that envelope, we do have a couple of things. Some directions, and oftentimes you're going to find them in 2 different languages. And it'll tell you how many pages of instructions you have. You will also have tissue paper that have the patterns on them. But let's take a look at what the instructions look like. When we open them up, they're not a book form. They are big sheets of paper that give us step-by-step directions. On the top of the first page, we have the pattern information and we have sketches of what the garment is going to look like. And we also have the views. So in my case, I will have the B, which is my front, and the B in the back. So I can see what that's going to look like. And if we look really close, we can see pocket placements and zippers if they're in there. You'll see these little lines on the sides, and those represent pockets. If there was a zipper, we would be able to see a little drawing of the zipper. As we go further down on the directions, we're going to see the pattern pieces. All of the pattern pieces in this tissue paper are labeled right here. We have numbers on them, and those numbers are going to correspond with the tissue paper. So if I'm looking for piece number 1, I'll be able to find it on the tissue paper. It also will label what all of those pieces mean. And they do break them down for you. So I have a top, the skirt, shorts, and pants. And because this is in 2 different languages, I do have my second language on the other side. The other sections on this front page usually talk about some kind of sewing directions. They talk about notions, supplies that you're going to need, and if you can do any alterations. It will mention this usually on the front pages. And it also will give you a layout suggestion. If we don't have room on the first page for the layout section, it will be on the next page. So we will be able to follow along as we're going. If this is your first pattern, take time and read all of these sections, because a lot of times they have hints and tips to help you with the sewing of this particular project. The first thing we need to decide is what are we going to make and what view is it. In my case, I'll be making view B. When I look for view B, it will tell me what pattern pieces I need. I do not need all of these pieces because this is a multi-pattern, so I can make lots of different things. So in my case, I'm going to need pattern piece number 5, 6, and 7. So let's find those pieces on this tissue paper. All of the pieces are going to be on this thin tissue paper, and they're really packaged quite nicely. And you often will have more than one sheet. Take all of your patterns and press them with a dry, low heat iron. We just want to take all of the wrinkles out. Starting with this tissue paper pressed has a lot of advantages. Number one, it's easier to work with. We're going to be able to fold it up better, and it's going to make our sewing better. If we don't press it, those folds will actually take up a little bit of space, so the pattern pieces might not fit exactly. It's important that all of the pieces fit like puzzles, so we need to start with the fabric and the pattern pieces pressed flat. I need to find pattern pieces 5, 6, and 7. The pattern has been designed for a child and adult, so in this case I have 2 number 6s. I have a number 6 for an adult, and it will say the size right on that pattern piece. But I'm looking for the 6 for the child size. Even on this one piece, we will have lots of different sizes. Now, if you've bought a pattern that only has one size, you will not have options. With this pattern, I'm going to be able to use sizes 3 to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 to 8. So I have 3 sizes on this one pattern piece. The lines are cutting lines, so the seam allowances are built in. You will see different lines for different sizes. For example, that size 7-8 has a solid line. The size 5-6 has a large broken line. And the size 3 to 4 has a small broken line. So we're going to be able to follow those sizes from the lines that we need. I like to keep my patterns the way they are. But if you are okay with cutting your pattern, you're going to be able to cut your pattern pieces out on the size of the line that you need. So if you're making a size 7-8, you're going to cut them out all on that solid line. But I like to draw my patterns on another piece of paper so that I can keep these pages for another use. So you will need a product that you can see through so you can copy those lines. You can use tissue paper, or you can get a product that is designed for you to trace your patterns on. It's like a very lightweight interfacing, but it has no give to it, so there's no stretch. I'm going to follow that small dot line. I don't need to draw it in the dot lines. I just need to transfer those marks on my paper. As we trace those lines, we also need to trace any markings that are underneath. For example, there are 2 little triangles that stick out. Some markings, it doesn't say which marking to use. For example, I have 3 dots. The furthest dot out will be the largest size, and then I'm going to be able to work in and transfer that dot. As I trace out that pattern, not only do I add all the markings, I write all the words that I'm going to need. I have a fold line, stitching lines, and then right in the center, just like they have in the pattern, I write down on this extra pattern piece. I also add the pattern company, the pattern number, and what size I'm cutting out. So all the information that's here has been duplicated on this other form. By doing this, I have pattern pieces that are probably 30 years old that I'm able to use over and over again. And I get to use more than one size. I need pattern pieces 5, 6, and 7, so I'll trace them all out. If you decide you want to cut out the tissue paper on its own, I would recommend that you trace the lines that you need to cut out first with some kind of a colored marker. And that way it will be easier as you cut out the pattern. If you make a mistake with the marker, it's easier to change than having to tape some paper back together. We can cover a lot of these markings as we are going through this garment, but there are 2 lines we need to know about even before we lay this on the fabric. One is a grain line. A grain line is this long arrow. There'll be a point at one end and sometimes a point at the other, and it will say grain line on it. The next line we need to look for is a center fold. This particular pattern piece needs to be put on a fold of the fabric, and we can see that by this U-shaped arrow. So it will be placed on a fold of a fabric, not an edge of the fabric. Once I can identify those 2 lines, I'm going to be able to lay the pattern pieces onto the fabric. They have a suggested layout on how the pattern pieces should be laid on top of the fabric. I will be looking for how wide my fabric is and the size that I'm making. My fabric that I purchased is 45 inches wide, and I'm looking for the child size between 4 to 6. That's going to refer to this chart right here. It also tells me what pattern pieces I'm going to be using. So depending on what size and what fabric you have, you're going to be able to follow this chart. To help us even understand more of this, there's going to be a guide. So in this case, that solid fabric is going to be the fabric right side up. The white is the wrong side of the fabric. The rest are for interfacings and linings. So that dark fabric is the right side. And I need a little bit of a fold right there so that white area is the wrong side. When we look at the layout of the pattern pieces, we have some pieces that are in white and some pieces that are in a darker polka dot. The different colors means the different way we put the pattern pieces up. Just like the fabric, there's the wrong side and the right side of the pattern pieces. So I have the right side and the wrong side. My piece number 6 is my skirt. I need that skirt put along that fold of the fabric. So those little arrows on that pattern are going to go along the fold. I need a front and a back. I'll be using that pattern piece twice. I have the pattern with those arrows along that one edge, which is the fold. So it's going to go along the fold. It's telling me I don't need all of the fabric folded. I'm only going to need enough for the skirt front and the skirt back. So I have folded my fabric just enough so that I can get this whole piece along the edge. I have that center fold line going to go right along that center fold. Because I want to use this pattern twice, I want to make sure I have enough space on this fold. So I lay my pattern out first and just put something down where you know you're going to have a cutting line. Just pick up the pattern and move it a second time. You want to make sure you have enough before you cut your pattern pieces. So I'm going to cut the first one out first and pin the pieces together. Once the one piece is cut out, I'm going to be able to transfer the pattern onto the second. I have both my skirt front and my back cut out. I'm going to put this aside and finish cutting the rest of the pieces. And since I still have some fabric on the fold, I'm going to be able to cut out my pieces right in this little area, and that way I can save the rest for another project. My pocket pieces, I need to cut out 4 times, 2 with the pattern facing up and 2 with the pattern facing down. And we need to follow a grain line. The grain line means the straight of the grain. So instead of cutting each piece out individually, I'm going to be able to cut 2 out in one direction and 2 out in the second direction. The next thing we need to do is transfer these markings onto the fabric. There are many different ways to mark your fabric, depending on your fabric and depending on the marks that you need. Because my fabric is a light color, I'm going to use a blue water-soluble marker, which means I can mark my fabric, and then when I spritz it with water or wash it, the markings are going to come off. Whatever marking pencil you use, be sure to test it on a piece of fabric first before you put it on your actual fabric. On the pattern, we will have these little triangles. You can have 1 triangle, 2 triangles, 3 triangles, or more. The triangles are going to match up the fabrics together. And we happen to have all 4 pieces together. We need to keep those marks within the seam allowance. You can just fold that pattern piece back, and where the mark is on that pattern, you need to transfer them onto the fabric. And I need that on all 4 edges. These 2 circles are going to be stopping and starting lines. Our seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, and this is where we're going to stop sewing because the pocket is going to fit in the center. My favorite is just to put a pin right through the center of that dot. Now I'm going to be able to just fold back my layers and make my mark. that when I take that pin out, I have my marking there. We do have a mark right here on the fold, and it's going to be where we stitch on our bow tie. So we need to transfer that mark to just the front piece. From here, we have 3 other lines. Just fold that pattern over, and I can continue drawing my lines. When this has all been marked, I'm going to mark my little tie and my pocket. For my pocket, I'm going to be able to transfer that single triangle on all 4 pieces, and make sure you mark the wrong side of the fabric. Now next month we're going to take time and we're going to put this whole skirt together. We're going to readdress these markings and how they work towards us sewing them. This pattern does recommend that you use a fabric that is a woven, so there's no stretch to it. It's a great pattern to start with, and we can make 4 wonderful pieces out of it. Regardless if you cut new pattern pieces or cut the original tissue, it's a lot of fun to make. Next month, we are going to be able to sew this all together. And we'll talk about finishing off the edges. So we've talked about the ins and the out of the pattern package. Next month, we're going to sew that piece together. Now you can choose whatever pattern you want, and the techniques are going to be the same. I'm going to work with this pattern and make it a couple of different times. I'm going to make the skirt, and the following month, we're going to make those pants. I do hope you join me. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.